is month 2 of our wealth creation cohort. I'm really excited to see you again. I know I saw you last week. Hopefully the rest of our meetings will be a little less compressed, but that was just because of travel. But yeah, anyway, today we're talking about wealth creation, the SEDS, which I know is like, I feel like everybody is, that's kind of I'm just opening this, is kind of one of the biggest questions I get about wealth creation is like, how do you integrate it into the SEDS? So we're going to talk about that today, and I'm going to admit Sawyer and Brittany. Yeah, anyway, so we're going to talk about the SEDS today. We have Chad Lacombe, who I'm really excited could join us. He is like one of my superstars around integrating wealth creation to the SED. So he's going to talk to you about his experience. And yeah, anyway, so that's what we're going to do today. So we're going to continue to get to know each other. Yes, I have another icebreaker, and it's a way for us to get to know each other a little bit. We're going to talk about how wealth creation can be used in the SEDS process and the content. And we're going to hear from Chad, who was with an EDD. Now he's with a university, but he can still talk about what he's been up, what that was like, and maybe how it connects to what he's doing now. So yes. Anyway, so we're going to do our icebreaker. It's just bear with me. It'll also help Chad to understand who's here, like where you all are from. And yes, so I can start. I'm going to stop sharing so I can. So I'll start. Melissa Levy with NATO. My favorite breakfast food is, that's a good question. I would say French toast, or I really like a spinach scramble. But so yeah, I'm gonna call on folks just because it's easier and quicker. Lisa, you're up.
Lisa Ryan with Concho Valley Council of Governments, and I would have to say probably a breakfast burrito.
Okay, cool. Chad, I'm gonna put you on the spot since you're here.
Chad Lacombe. I'm with the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, formerly the Acadiana Planning Commission. I think my favorite food is a boudin kolache.
What is that?
Well, and I'd have to explain boudin first, which is it's sort of a local thing where you have rice and pork meat stuffed into a casing. Sometimes it's smoked, sometimes it's not. The smoked ones are really, really good. And then the kolache takes that and puts it in, like a little bread shell.
Oh, so this is a Louisiana. It sounds
It's
like a
a Louisiana
Louisiana.
thing.
Okay. Thanks for sharing and educating. So I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but yes, thank you. Ethan.
Hi everyone, Ethan Wary with the Mid-Iowa Planning Alliance in Iowa. I have my camera off because I have our team with me here in the conference room. We're planning to update our SEDS here in the next fiscal year, and so I thought it'd be a good presentation for everyone to join in.
Cool.
Favorite breakfast food, we're talking about it. Mine is, oh man, you can't go wrong with like a good pancake, you know?
Yep, I hear ya. I have an issue with pancakes personally, but that's a whole nother conversation. So, Lindsay.
Lindsay Brown was the Lake Cumberland Area Development District in Kentucky, and my favorite breakfast food would be biscuits and gravies.
Okay. Cool. Heather.
Hi, everybody. I'm Heather Devitt. I work for Mohawk Valley Economic Development District, or MVED. We're in the central part of New York State, and I am a child of the 80s, so cold cereal, morning, noon, and night works perfectly.
Wow. Okay. Sawyer, you're up.
Hey y'all, Sawyer Summers with the Regional Planning Commission of Greater Birmingham in Birmingham, Alabama. Favorite breakfast food is very difficult for me. I love all types of breakfast foods, but I love bacon, egg, and cheese croissant, which I happen to have right here. And I will be eating, so I'll turn my camera off when I do that.
So morning,
Totally.
noon, and night, right?
Oh, yeah. Any time of day.
My husband insists that you can't eat breakfast food after noon, which I completely disagree with. I'm a big fan of breakfast for dinner myself, but to each their own. So, thanks, Sawyer. Taylor.
Hi, Taylor Lennox with Mission West Community Development Partners. We're an EDO based out of Ronan, Montana, so Western Montana.
Cool.
I'm a sucker for hash browns. Just classic
Oh,
dirty spoon, like greasy spoon diner hash browns. Love them.
nice. As do I. Thanks, Taylor.
Mhm.
Amanda. Ooh, why did you all black out? That's weird. I don't know what
Oh
that
no,
is. Oh,
it's my
okay.
energy. Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm from Embed as well, Mohawk Valley. And sorry everyone, I'm gonna offend you. I don't really like breakfast food,
Mm.
but Heather does give me cold pizza sometimes when I come into the office for breakfast. That's probably my favorite.
Wow. Okay. It takes all kinds. Brittany.
Hello, I'm Brittany. I work with Taylor, also at Mission West Community Development Partners in Montana, and I love a good avocado toast.
Ooh,
So yeah.
cool. Excellent. Okay. And right, last but not least, Ryan.
My favorite breakfast food is coffee,
Coffee. As is mine. As is
but
mine. Yeah.
my actual is biscuits and gravy. If I see biscuits and gravy, I can't say no.
Okay. Cool. Thanks for sharing, everybody. And yeah, thanks for playing my games, I guess. Okay, back to this. So I'm gonna reiterate these principles every time we talk, and these are like the key principles of wealth creation, which is really about creating wealth, rooting it locally, and building livelihoods. And yeah, anyway, I'm going to just keep talking about it. And again, the 8 capitals, this is them. I'm not going to read this. You are perfectly capable. And again, we use these in assessing what we have, designing strategies, and measurement, and all of which are going to come into play today when we talk about the SEDS. So these will become very important in our discussion today. We're going to be talking about these throughout the cohort because they're all relevant. And then here's our continuum, kind of like we're in the beginning, right? Where we just started our cohort. We're going to focus on assets for this month. Next month, I'm hoping to talk about the sector strategy kind of piece, and then we'll be working on the value chain development side. But we're firmly in focusing on assets right now. And when I when I came to NATO, I've been doing wealth creation for a very long time. But when I came to NATO, I had to rethink like how do you use it in terms of EDDs and the SEDS and kind of this presentation and a lot of the resources on the NATO website are focused on how you can use it in terms of the process and the content. So the process is really about like who are you engaging and how, and the content is how do we talk about assets and our strengths and weaknesses through the lens of assets and evaluation too. So I'm going to start with process, and I'm just going to lay this all out, and then I'm going to ask Chad to kind of share the Acadiana story because I think it's a really good one. And there are a lot of great stories. There's a whole microsite that talks about all of this, so you can dig into the SEDS that are referenced here too, if that's useful. But one way, the way that I've seen in terms of the process is really this is a great example. Region 5 Development Commission in Minnesota you can see they actually built their strategy committee for their SEDS, and they call it CREDS because it's like Comprehensive Regional Economic Development Strategy, which is why it says CREDS. But anyway, they actually built this committee not only by like, the parts of the region and the different roles, but also what the strength is, right? The strength of different people in building these different capitals, which I thought was really interesting. There's some other great resources on the NATO website, how to build the strategy committee. Probably doesn't get into this so much. I've also seen it be used in terms of thinking about value propositions. So not only what strength are you good at building, but like, and this is a tool that's also on the website about, how do you understand your committee through this lens? So you can think about your current committee members, potential partners that might be working to build these different kinds of assets. And then it gets at this whole value proposition idea, which is something we're going to be talking about throughout the cohort. Everything is built on some sort of self-interest, right? We want to believe that we're all working together, and we are, but ultimately when you're creating partnerships, there's a point where you both need to be getting something out of it. So that's where the value proposition comes in. So why would they be interested in participating in your work, meaning your SEDS, or it could be other parts of your work, and how would you engage them? And how you would engage them is by understanding that value proposition and kind of speaking to it. So this is a great tool for, I would argue for the SEDS, but also, for the SEDS committee, but also just for thinking about partnerships in general throughout your work. So this is a tool that's available. And that's what I've seen in terms of process. I think as I learn more from folks who are actually doing it, I'll have more examples, but that's what I've seen. Most of where I've seen wealth creation sets is in the content. And that's where we're going to be spending most of the time here. And these are the ways I've seen it in asset inventory and mapping, considering the capitals through the SWOT, and then evaluating progress. Yeah. So I'm just going to walk through these different sections kind of quickly, like of how I see it being used in these different sections, which is kind of the outline of the SEDS. So even the summary background, this is, the economic conditions of the region. You're asking, what have we done? What's going on? And you're reporting the conditions of the region. And I think you can still do this across the 8 capitals. I mean, the obvious ones, you're going to be reporting jobs and employment, educational attainment, revenues, income. But you can also include conditions of natural capital, cultural capital, any of them really. So, I mean, I think it's an opportunity to say what's going on across those capitals. I haven't seen that as much in SEDS, and I think it's because the summary background just always looks a certain way and does certain things. So that's not to say you couldn't, but it's probably more valuable in the other places. So again, back to our asset inventory, you've all seen this. You all got to do this. And this is another tool for the SEDS. I mean, this is something you could do in a facilitated meeting. You could do it in a committee, is like, what do we actually have? And I like using this as an asset inventory because I feel like a lot of times when we think about assets on the ground, we're thinking about physical assets, right? We're thinking about infrastructure. We're thinking about natural assets. Maybe it's mostly built and natural, I think, that I see most when we're thinking about assets. Maybe some of the individual and intellectual pieces too, and cultural, but this working through an inventory like this really gets at some of those less tangible assets. We talked about this too. I just wanted to bring it back because I have seen it used in a SEDS. This is the southeastern COG, and I think South Dakota actually used the spider diagram, which some of you got to try out. just to see like where their capitals are more broadly, right? It's not as fine-toothed as the inventory, but it gives more of an impression of like how things are going. And this is in their sets. And then the SWOT, and a SWOT is really the first thing I thought of when I was thinking about how to use wealth creation in the SEDS. And this is a tool that we put together to really think about like what does it mean to use the community capitals in the SWOT. And so you can see some, I mean, again, I'm not going to read through this, but um, but you can see how they fit, right? The capitals that we have, user could use more of are our strengths. Capitals that are missing are clearly our weaknesses. And underutilized capitals are almost always opportunities. I feel like most of wealth creation, most of the work I've done in wealth creation has focused on those underutilized capitals. Like, what do we have that we could put into use that isn't being used right now? So anyway, there's a lot embedded in here, but I've seen a lot of folks use the community capitals in the SWOT, and certainly Chad will be talking about that too. I probably have his examples in here. I probably do. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but he'll talk about it. But
Well, in fact, I used the same slide, so.
Yes. Acadiana did a great job of really like using the capitals in those SWOT examples, and I will leave it at that and let him share. And then you can see in these other examples, I think this is from Buckeye Hills. Ryan would probably know, but I think so. You can see
That is correct.
Yeah, I thought so too. But you can see it's not maybe built out as the 8 capitals, but you can see it in these SWOT categories. They're all there. Yeah. Anyway, there's some really nice examples. And then even in the strategy, this is something I haven't seen as much in terms of the strategy, organizing it by capitals. But you can see this is the Southeastern COG again in South Dakota. They had 3 goals. You can see them here: facilitate responsible community planning and development, promote and diversify workforce and business development, and foster community vibrancy and resiliency. And each of those goals had multiple strategies, each of which noted key partners, capitals affected, and measures, which this is a really nice way to include it. And it also allows for you to make sure that through all of your strategies, you're impacting all those capitals. So it's almost like it's not a test. It's kind of like a checklist almost. Like, are we creating impact on all these capitals? I'll share this. PowerPoint they will be up on the website, so you can then click on those links and go to those the actual SEDS. And I'm gonna skip over Acadiana because Chad's gonna talk about it, but they also do an amazing job, which is why I have Chad here, because they've been just really a great example. And I love this. This is again Region 5 in Minnesota. And it's just like how they think about it. And I kind of love it. This who else cares about this is really the question we're asking as we're thinking about collaboration. And it gets at what I was talking about earlier in terms of value propositions. Like, this is the question that we want to be asking. Who else cares about this? And I feel like, if we bring that question into our SEDS, it creates the opportunity to understand potential partners we might not have thought about. So anyway, it's just something I really like. And then wealth creation as part of evaluation. Like, this is actually the one place that EDA has mentioned wealth creation, which is in the evaluation. So you can see it here, highlighted because of its natural alignment with asset-based strategies and approaches. It's about measuring more than just jobs and income. And so this is where EDA has made this a best practice, which is evaluation. So, and yeah, it's in the evaluation kind of framework. And you can see some of these places, I are talking about how they're going to be. I mean, they haven't talked about what they're measuring so much as they're talking about the fact that they are going to be measuring. One thing I should have put in here is the SEDS that I got to work on in the North Olympic Peninsula in Washington. And one place that wealth creation did show up in that SEDS was in the evaluation framework, where I think we had not only the metrics for the individual strategies, but like we had one or two metrics for each of the capitals included too. I'll have to add that to this because that's from my own experience that would be maybe useful. And this is another kind of tool that I have that may be useful as you think about this and this is something that I had even before wealth creation. I do a lot of measurement coaching and measurement consulting, and this is something that we used and I kind of adapted to the capitals, but it starts with strategy. What are you actually going to, I would argue it actually starts before this with goals. Like, what are you trying to achieve? The strategies, what are you actually going to do? Indicator, what's the change that you're looking for? Like the change, and then the measure is how you actually measure that change. And finally, well, not finally, but the baseline is clearly the first time you measure. And typically we want to be thinking about a target. What are you actually working toward? What's that number? Or maybe it's not a number. And then how are you actually going to measure it? How are you going to use it? And then do you need partners to actually measure this? So I could go on and on about measurement, and at some point, maybe I will add a measurement piece to this cohort, but I find this tool really helpful when I'm talking to organizations trying to figure out what to measure and why they're measuring it and how they're measuring it. So anyway, that is also on the website. I just want to reiterate that wealth creation is noted as a best practice in the content guidelines, mostly around evaluation, but it really offers an asset-based approach to economic development, provides vocabulary to engage stakeholders, and can complement traditional metrics. And I also wanted to just kind of share some ways that you see it, see wealth creation in the SEDS. Honestly, I'm sure that you're all doing pieces of wealth creation already. We haven't talked about it like this. I mean, I don't want to suggest that this is new. I think the way that I'm trying to present this is, how can you maybe promote more wealth creation in your SEDS? So, but the way you see it is, fostering asset-based development by leveraging local assets. I'm sure you're all doing these things. Encouraging local and regional entrepreneurship is really about keeping wealth local. And these are some of the methods of doing it. Enhancing capital access through innovative financing tools and public infrastructure projects, and measuring wealth creation beyond jobs. So, and then I wanted to share also some of this, what it looks like. The thing I've seen, I guess, the most in SEDS that maybe aren't fully kind of wealth creation SEDS is local ownership. I have seen a lot of local ownership in different SEDS. Like you can see it here with Southern Tier 8 in New York. Continue to build a regional local ownership entrepreneurial community. That is about keeping wealth local. So that's something that's just there. Here's Black Hawk Hills in Illinois is talking about employee stock ownership plans, talking about it with their proprietary business owners. So again, that's already there. That's wealth creation right there. And a couple of other examples. This is Northwest Michigan. Again, local entrepreneurship, regional value chains, ensuring workforce development for local residents, And then Southeast Alaska, you can see local ownership of businesses and infrastructure to retain wealth within the region. Preserving heritage, cultural tourism is building cultural capital, and some of this sustainable resource management. These are kind of the ways that I see it in SEDS that are existing already. So I'm guessing many of you already have some of these things in your SEDS. These are clear kind of wealth creation strategies. So before I pass it along to Chad, I know I just said a lot of stuff. There is a lot of, there are a lot of resources on the NATO microsite that I've been putting together, including connections to all the SEDS that I mentioned. But yeah, any questions or any thoughts about how this is already in your SEDS or how you're already thinking about this in terms of your SEDS? Questions? Yeah. Questions, comments, like anything on anybody's mind? Okay. No pressure. All right. Maybe after Chad talks, I'm guessing you'll have more to ask about. So I'm going to share this again. I don't know why I closed it. And I'm going to hand it to Chad. I'm so excited that he could make it. He has been one of my star examples of how EDDs are doing this. And yeah, with that, I'll pass it to Chad Lacombe. Thanks for being here.
Okay, and just as a context, before working at the University of Louisiana Lafayette, I was at the Acadiana Planning Commission, which is actually a relatively new planning commission. No, new being 10 years old now, but it was reconstituted in 2015, and that first SEDS was kind of like an arduous process that we did in partnership with UL Lafayette, and the Lead Center, which is a university center which no longer exists since the program was decommissioned for EDA, but the Lead Center provided technical support and part of the analysis and background for our first SEDS. And integral to that was actually a survey. We did pre and post surveys before community engagement. When we came around for our second SEDS, what we did was we decided we needed a better organizational structure and to be a little bit more granular. And we settled on the WealthWorks model because it does kind of force you to be a little bit more granular and be deliberate about, what your assets are and building off of your strengths rather than, reacting to weaknesses or perceived weaknesses. We can go to the next slide. So this is what we ended up with is the 2022-27, which is the most current SEDS for Acadiana Planning Commission. And I can share a link so you can browse through it. What we did when we began the engagement process for the new SEDS was actually redo the survey, having the same questions, but we reclassified the questions and to where they met or lined up with the 8 domains or capitals, so that we could kind of evaluate how much progress we made based on the old SEDS, but on the same token, rephrase the question to where we're looking at it from a wealth creation model rather than just a random economic development focused strategic plan. Okay, next slide. So again, key points for what is it said? It's federally recognized regional economic development strategy framework, which is the EDA side. It's the stuff we got to do as planning and development districts as part of our EDA designation, with a focus on innovation, regional collaboration, sustainable growth. For APC, we use it for investment planning and economic coordination. When we get further along, I'll show you how those kind of played out in some of the things we did and the accomplishments we had that were based and rooted in the SEDS. Okay, next slide. So it's a strategic approach, very data-driven decision-making. We represent 7 parishes or counties with a population of roughly 600,000, which includes everything from very rural coastal to with very low population density to the city of Lafayette, which is the 3rd largest metro area in Louisiana. We engaged in a series of stakeholder engagement meetings. And similar to what Melissa outlined earlier, we had put together a SEDS committee, and we kind of broke the engagement into 3 different groups. The first group was the elected officials, which was the first meeting we had. The second group were our economic development professionals. And then the third group are, community-based organizations that more directly interact with people. Prior engagement had focused on infrastructure, workforce, and industry clusters, which is kind of integral to the whole SEDS process anyways, except in this case, we're aligning it with those centers of capital. Okay, let's go to the next one. So in the 3 meetings, the first one was March 22nd and 23, and we held it and we moved these around throughout the region so that everybody would have an opportunity to engage. And this was an evaluation of where we were relative to the prior SEDS, again, in introducing the WealthWorks model to our elected officials. And that included our state legislators. The second meeting was the SWOT analysis meeting. And as a deep dive on our SWOT analysis, we actually did a SWOT analysis for each of the 8 capitals. And then from there, we built the second and led it to the third one, the future goals, objectives, and strategies. This is where we did our goals and objective analysis based on the SWOT. Okay, next slide.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at it as an economic development framework, it helps you organize and be more intentional around these areas of capital. And it prevents you really from losing out on something that you might have missed through just regular one-on-one engagement. It forces you to be intentional. It is also about building wealth that sticks locally, and it's also strengthening our value chains so that we're more intimately connected to what we're trying to do from an economic development standpoint. And it also forces us to invest in multiple forms of capital. And I'll point out that for some of the things that we identify as an asset, a lot of times they'll bridge multiple centers of capital. And in identifying those areas where we have a strong asset of multiple centers is really where we base on what we want to do as a jump to the next goal or goal forming, for lack of a better word. Let's move on to the next one. So the reason why we used it was as an organizational schema. So traditional economic development models focus on business recruitment and large-scale capital projects. Those can still be integrated into a wealth creation model, but instead of focusing on landing a big fish that doesn't really fit the local workforce or the land that we have available or the utilities that we have available, this focuses on what do we have and what can we go after reasonably that plays to our strengths and is more likely to be successful and long term. We also recognize that there was a need for an alternative that promotes both inclusive growth, so it impacts both rural and urban communities, and also it impacts minority communities and other communities or stakeholder groups that aren't normally addressed in the traditional economic development strategic planning process. It also is a good connection to the SEDS and aligns with EDA priorities such as innovation, equity, and resilience. And resilience being a coastal community, or at least a coastal region, is big in our playbook. We're impacted by hurricanes and man-made disasters like the BP Horizon oil spill, which has dramatically changed our oil and gas industry here. In fact, oil and gas mineral extraction accounted for about a quarter of our workforce in 2014. But after BP, that number decreased by half. So from about 20,000 jobs to less than 10 in less than a 5-year period. Pretty dramatic. And that's a shift away from offshore mineral extraction and more to onshore models like fracking and other onshore resources. At the end of the day, it comes down to the insurance risk for drilling offshore because of BP became so high that it wasn't economically feasible to drill offshore as frequently as we had been. Okay, next slide. So we did a SWOT analysis for each of the 8 domains, sorry. And we use this to develop our high-level set of goals. And these are based on the weaknesses and threats where we had to address where we could move or address outside actions like a change in the oil and gas industry, and then identify gaps that we needed to fill. And again, this is also playing off of our strengths rather than our weakness, rather than how do we try to land the big fish. in this case, it was how do we pivot off of what we already do well? Like, for example, we had an underemployed trained manufacturing workforce that went with the oil and gas industry when it was at its heyday. How do we pivot that to attract other types of manufacturing that workforce could be retrained and plugged into? And then the other side is what other assets that we have that we could leverage, like the ones at the university. And it's not a well-known fact, but the University of Louisiana Lafayette has a strong renewable energy focus in our research programs and a lot of patents. And we have a solar energy system, which is one of the newest field testing stations for solar panels. We pivoted that strength and the workforce that was available to identify and target going after solar panel manufacturing or PV manufacturing in the region. And right after the CEDS was unveiled, we were able to attract First Solar, which is the nation's largest domestic supply chain oriented solar panel manufacturing, to build a $1.2 billion manufacturing plant within our region and employ 1,800 people directly in their plant, which offset a significant portion of the jobs we lost in the oil and gas plant, now moving into advanced manufacturing. That plant is now open and cranking out solar panels. And as a university, again, pivoting and using that as one of our goals and objectives in our CEDS that we identified through the SWOT analysis and our strength analysis, we built up a workforce retraining program here at the university where we have a basic mirrors assembly line, both virtually as a digital twin and physically, where First Solar now is doing all of their training for all of their plants in the U.S. here. The other value is we developed out performance-based objectives under each goal. So if it was a cultural related goal, it was how do we increase employment or increase compensation for our gig economy. If it was manufacturing, it's how do we replace manufacturing jobs that were lost in oil and gas. And with hard numbers of where we want to be. And the other thing is we wanted to identify themes across domains to identify and prioritize action items. So things that hit multiple domains are things that we probably need to take a hard look at. And when I say multiple domains, I mean multiple centers of capital. Okay, next slide. Okay, so as an example, the SWOT analysis, and this is a summary table. We did in both internal and external factors, so strengths and weaknesses, and then identified strengths and weaknesses under each center of capital. Then we did the next half of the slide. The next slide is the rest of the SWOT analysis. But again, we're keeping and doing a SWOT analysis under each individual and then summarizing those results so we can cross tab where we have interesting synergies. Okay, next piece. So measuring WealthWorks outcomes, we use metrics which are jobs created or retained, new business formation. Part of what we're doing at the university now is promoting entrepreneurship, both locally, regionally, and now I have a USDA grant to do innovation-based startups in rural communities, and we're doing outreach and working with people to introduce them to the idea that you can do advanced manufacturing with all of the new additive manufacturing tools like 3D printers and other things more easily now in rural communities. And one of the areas of focus and one of the weaknesses in the SWOT analysis was broadband. Right after the CEDS was revealed, we targeted broadband expansion within our region as a major goal. And as a planning commission, we applied for an NTIA Broadband Infrastructure Program grant, the BIPs. Only 12 of those were awarded nationally, and we were one of the 12, which allowed us to bring and serve about 22,000 households in three of our most rural parishes, Acadia, St. Landry, and Evangeline. And Evangeline had among, even though we're flat and relatively easy to get to, it had one of the worst broadband penetration rates in the country. In fact, Ville Platte had like the worst broadband connectivity, or it was among the top 5 or 6, which is in Evangeline Parish. We were successful in pulling out that broadband and building out, which is another thing that we're now completed since the unveiling of the CEDS. And we're working now on how do you use that broadband to support small scale manufacturing and e-commerce. And the value here is by expanding broadband, our smaller communities who have experienced out-migration for decades now have the opportunity to capture people who want to start a business and go into one of those storefronts on their main street, because now they have access to a broader market through the web, which was something that wasn't possible before we were targeting on particular infrastructure growth. The BIP led to the state gumbo program, which was the broadband expansion program during COVID, and finally the BEAD program in Louisiana was among the first states to get their BEAD plan approved. So we're well on our way on making sure every household has broadband access, but also every business, which makes it a little bit easier now to kind of live in place or complete your whole life cycle in your hometown if you want to. And also attract people from outside the communities into smaller communities where, housing costs are lower. Okay. And again, tying back to the SEDS, the ED 916 reports that you have to do for all your grants, including your planning grant, is always a nice thing to be able to show. Okay, next. So takeaways. The APC says originally was traditional planning. We added the WealthWorks framework, which shifted our focus from projects to systems and looking at ecosystem growth. How do we improve how the whole system is working rather than landing a big project early, a big fish in terms of business recruitment, but also ones that fit our workforce and the assets that we have, so that there's some sustainability component to what we're attracting or what we're trying to do in terms of economic development. And then the result was we ended up with something that was more inclusive, far more resilient, and not subject to the ups and downs of the oil and gas industry. And it was also more locally rooted in our economy and our culture. And that's my contact info if anybody wants to ping me.
Thanks, Chad. That was great. And I think I feel like I know we had some of the same slides, but one thing I did want to share is the goals too. And I think you mentioned this, but I thought it would help to see it, is that there was a
individual
goal.
capital. We have a set of goals.
Yes.
And this is just one example. We have a set of objectives that are performance based that go along with the first center capital or the first goal.
Right.
And they're very specific.
Yes. No.
And a lot of these are also tied back to our surveys. So these are things that were identified in surveys of things that we need to work on or our strengths. So these are directly correlated. And what we did was when we did our surveys, we did a Likert type scale. So you scale, you did strongly agree to strongly disagree, and then we evaluated or scored it based on where people landed. And the ones that were either strongly agree, that's an asset. Strongly disagree, that's something that's either a threat or an opportunity, or an opportunity or a weakness.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Then,
no, it's really nice. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And then frame the conversation around those where, okay, if we have this asset, how do we use that to address one of our weaknesses or opportunities or threats?
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, this is just one example, but I wanted to share it because, yeah, I saw that, and I've seen that in a couple of others, but it's a really nice way to organize. I mean, it means that you have 8 goals, but, presumably you'd have, I don't know how many goals folks have in their SEDS, but it kind of organizes things by kind of theme, I guess. So, but I love.
And under those, you have executable items that you can work on. For example, for First Solar, for expansion and renewable energy, and increased manufacturing capacity, we had infrastructure needs that we needed to address on the sites that could be used. So those are reflected in there. And then those infrastructure needs are things that we actively worked on and addressed. For the site that First Solar ultimately landed on, we needed increased water capacity, increased sewer capacity, and increase broadband access. Well, broadband access was an EDA grant. Sewer capacity was another EDA grant. We used bonded money to build a water treatment plant for them. And a lot of these we were doing concurrently with the negotiation, but it was because we'd identified our sets, we were more easily to tie it into our applications. And then we had some DRA money also flow into it for infrastructure needs.
Yeah, I mean, I love that example of how the SEDS led to this like really impressive program that has since created opportunities in economic development and workforce, and yeah, all of these things that I hadn't heard. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so I guess I'm gonna open it up. Questions, comments, thoughts as you think about. I feel like with the last cohort and with this one, I think a lot of people are thinking about their SEDS right now. So it's kind of timely. There are a lot of resources, but while we have Chad here, it seems like a great opportunity to kind of open it up. Feel free to just unmute yourself and ask a question. I don't need to like facilitate that part, but anything on anybody's mind? Yeah.
I kind of have a random thing. I've only been to Louisiana like once, but I know there was a lot of like the oil and gas, like especially along the shore. I didn't know if that was the case in your region and if you guys have been redeveloping it for like recreation or other purposes, or if that's kind of more outside your
That's actually
area.
principally our region. Basically, it also includes the Houma Thibodeau region as well, and into the Lake Charles region. So it's the three coastal planning and development districts. We're kind of in the middle of all three. Interestingly enough, and this has been reported in the news, I can say it. One of the redevelopment efforts is actually SpaceX is looking at one of our parishes for one of the recovery facilities. And they're actively negotiating with ExxonMobil, who owns 130,000 acres, to purchase that property for that facility. And the university has an asset that's adjacent to it. Ironically, we got donated 5 acres of land on high ground in Vermilion Parish, which is where they're talking about, to reposition. That wasn't even on the SEDS radar for us. The other interesting factor in this kind of an example of where things don't align. If you had done your asset mapping, you wouldn't have done it this way. But Northwest Louisiana is getting a ton of these AI data centers. So Meta is locating one. So is Amazon. Amazon multiple facilities in the Shreveport Bossier area, and Meta, which I just visited last week, in the Monroe extreme northeast corner of Louisiana. Now, from an asset mapping standpoint, the universities up there are not very good at AI, and they don't produce a workforce. So had they done asset mapping, they wouldn't have to scramble quite so much to cover their workforce needs. And we're ended up having to, because we do have a good AI program, we're having to cover some of the stuff that we're needing. In fact, I'm trying to set up a meeting right now with the medic rep. The other challenge up there is utilities, and they've had to build like 3 power plants for the Meta facility. Now the Meta facility is humongous. It's a 6 square mile construction project. If that tells you how big of a data center they're planning on building. And just to cover electricity, it's pretty substantial. Water's not an issue for them. As in other areas, water down here generally isn't, unless you don't have the production capacity. But I understand some reluctance to be a little bit further inland and away from a hurricane area. It just means that they've had to work a little bit harder on some of the other aspects because it wasn't necessarily a perfect fit.
Well, that leads me, I'm curious, like, I guess I think communities are trying to figure out what to do about data centers. Like, it sounds like they're just coming right in to Louisiana. Is that right?
Well, and the governor's office is very willing to take them.
Okay.
But the challenge here is where we have the developable land,
Yeah.
we don't have infrastructure to support it. So we're having to go in and backfill the infrastructure side, which goes with, part of the asset mapping and inventory that you do as part of your SEDS.
Yeah.
Identifying that as a weakness, that means it's something you can work on through your grant and funding programs. And that's one of the reasons why you do, the analysis.
Yeah. Absolutely. Cool. Thanks. Anybody else?
Quick question, with those data centers, do you know, like your governor's office, how much tax abatements, credits and everything were given out and how that could have been allocated elsewhere to support these local businesses and these, areas that were identified in your SEDS?
Well, the abatements have been very substantial. But we're also moving away from inventory taxes and taxing of those types of assets as a state government. Ironically, we're moving towards more sales tax, but that's kind of par for the game. They're trying to promote a more business-friendly environment, but and change how the tax credit structure is set up to where it's more grant rather than tax structure. So it's kind of in the middle of the transition period for that, and I am kind of waiting to see how it works out.
Interesting.
We have
So you're saying those entities aren't being taxed?
No, they are being taxed. What they're mostly doing is pilots, or payments and Leo taxes. And for their equipment, the equipment is actually where the value is, not so much in the dirt. And the depreciation cycle of things, those things is like really accelerated because it's technology oriented. So they're asking for pretty significant tax abatements or payments in Leo taxes to cover the cost of not getting it taxed as real property under ad valorem taxing or property taxing.
Interesting.
We have a current brownfield site that one of the redevelopment ideas is a data center. And you're talking, it's a huge site. It's over 1 million square feet. And there is so much local pushback on adding a data center. Like, they've just started the remediation side of things. Like, they're not even close. They're probably at least a year or two out before they can do anything at this site. And somebody got word of a data center, and it's crazy how much pushback they're getting. And I understand both sides of it. I'm not really thrilled about having a data center there either, but I'd rather have something there that generates tax dollars than have 1 million square foot of a brownfield site that nothing can happen with because it's dirty.
Yeah.
Well, and the other one of the pushbacks is the perception that it will have a negative impact on utility rates. It's really the biggest issue. And the water piece. The water piece. But for the size of I'll use the meta site as an example, they actually use less water than it would be if it had been retained in agricultural use for irrigation. So, and they're moving towards more closed loop systems rather than disposing. So you're kind of recycling the water and then having cooling ponds. And here we're not in a shortage of water like most parts of the country.
Well, and the funny thing about this site is they do have a closed water system already. They have their own water, and it cannot get recycled in with regular wastewater.
Right.
It can only be used for manufacturing. So I think there's just a lot of education that has to go around it before, I don't know, people just go with their gut first, like, oh, this is bad immediately, when it might be, but it also might not be. So
yeah.
Heather, I have to tell you, we're right there with you in San Angelo. We've got a big debate going on right now with a data center, and it's going to be a closed loop. And there's been several, I've gone to the public meetings. I'm also like you too. I'm like, I don't know which side of this I'm on, if I'm on a side at all. Because I don't really, but it's so much of it is misinformation. I mean, that's what I've learned. And people, and that's probably something we can address even in our SEDS and things like that. People assume everything they're being told is a lie. I mean, I cannot tell you how many things say, oh, that's a lie. Oh, that's a lie, even if it's scientific fact. So that's been our experience here, is just it's been, oh, they're just lying to us. Oh, it's, and we've gone through the They approved the zoning yesterday. So they've gone, so those are so we're pretty far down the line. But it's, it's been interesting. And the other thing, just to share some information, what's going on, because I went to the meetings, as far as the closed loop system in our case, they are putting in so when they do have to recycle the water out or something happens, they're putting in a tank that will clean the water, and there's going to be independent inspection of it before it can be released back into our sewers. Of course, everybody says they're lying. And the other is about the power, and of course everybody knows the power problems Texas has had, and so nobody trusts it. But supposedly what they have to do is if ERCOT's supposed to come in and tell them what they need as far as power, and if it doesn't exist, the developers have to build the infrastructure. They have to pay for it. Once again, everybody says they're lying, but that's where we are. And if you ever need to talk about it, Heather, reach out to me, because like I said, we're further down the line, and I'm staying involved. But it is one of those things that I'm looking at our SEDS too, saying, okay, do we include it or not?
Yeah. Do you know how many jobs they're looking to add?
The meta site, which is the largest one in the country, is 500 jobs.
Yeah, we're only going to have, during construction, they'll have a lot of jobs. And of course, that is one of the things we're asking is, please make those local. Don't bring, because in Abilene, they brought people in. Please don't bring people in, make those local. But they were saying ours is smaller right now, so it's going to be 30 to 50 people, but it's round the clock. So I think they said it could be up to 100 because of that round the clock feature of it.
Yeah. And most of the ones that are on site are actually electricians and maintenance folks, and it's people that have to maintain the building and the infrastructure. The IT side of it isn't hosted locally. It's usually from wherever their headquarters are.
Oh, so you're really looking at skilled labor then?
No, you still get skilled labor, but we actually have a shortage in that, and particularly in our part of the state up there, you have really a shortage of skilled labor. It's a low density population area, and a lot of them have migrated out.
Well, is that, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No,
did you guys have any local laws in place or anything to have them do closed loop systems? Because I think, I don't know what some of the ones that are proposed near us, but I've seen some communities in New York State make like laws, but I didn't know if you guys had any mechanisms.
Some, and it's patchwork. It depends on the parish or the county.
Yeah, I'll share my experience. So east of us in Johnson County, Iowa, Google was coming to build a data center, and they're going to build it within the county. And so the county updated their ordinance on data centers and said, hey, you need to do like a water table study. You need to do the setback, the noise, like all these requirements. And Google decided to sidestep because they're frustrated with they don't want to be regulated at all. And so they sidestepped and decided to go with the city of Palo and not within the region of the county. And I'll also say like the city of Palo has a decommissioned nuclear power plant, and so Google also partnered with the Duane Arnold nuclear power plant to then bring it back to life basically, but there's a 25-year contract where only the energy generated from the nuclear power plant can be used to power the data center. So none of those benefits are going to the community, really. I mean, it's all Google's property now of the data center and the power plant. And, they decided, hey, we're not going to deal with the county. We're just going to sidestep you and go right to the city.
Interesting.
And
so I understand like the distrust. So when people are talking about distrust with data centers, it's like you try to use your local tools that you have, and then when the state and federal governments are backing the data centers and not backing the local residents, it makes sense when there's not going to be local trust, because they're showing right there like, hey, we'll just do whatever we can to not deal with you.
Do you think some of that's coming from from the collaboration between the communities and or between economic development agencies that kind of intersect with each other, that that the organizations are more like, you know what, that's not my problem kind of thing. Do you think some of that played a role in this?
That's a good question. And I don't live in the area. I used to live in the area, but I moved out of the area. But I know the people that worked for the county commission and everything. So what was your question? More of like what was the work like?
Yeah,
Working together?
did Google do the workaround because there really wasn't that collaboration between the town and the city or economic development, whoever was bringing Google in and all of
Right.
that there wasn't that collaboration across organizations or across the region or across the area, that Google was able to kind of slide in the back door instead?
They've been in collaboration for a while. And so it sounded like they're trying to appease, like the county's trying to appease both parties, like appease both the citizens and appease Google. And then Google did the step around. I'll try to find the articles and everything, and I'll submit it here in the chat so everyone can follow up, because I think it's a good example of, I do believe there's best practices, and I think NATO does a good job of listing those best practices when it comes to working with data centers and community. But at the end, they're a business, and a business will do, and not only a business, they're multi-trillion-dollar corporations that will do
Yep.
whatever they can to benefit their stakeholders and not the community.
Which is why when you're negotiating these deals, you put together a community benefit plan. That's usually part of the negotiation. But from a perspective of the SEDS, it may be that if you're doing your SWOT analysis and your asset mapping, if you count it as an asset, think about what do you need to really tap into that asset to make it benefit your citizens, and that may not be directly jobs, but in the case of a data center, how do you do the applied part of it? How do you tap into that asset to attract other businesses that can cluster around it? And that's an assessment of your infrastructure. Do you have an internet exchange point, or which is one of those things that is used to reduce latency when you're accessing that resource? Internet exchange points are also sometimes called hoteling, which means that you have multiple people who use internet resources in one building, and they can connect through that one portal, and then that portal has a direct access to the major on ramps on the internet, the broader internet. By having a hoteling facility, which is something that you may or may not have, you're making it a little bit more attractive for businesses to cluster around that asset, which is a data center, because that data center would be directly tied into that hoteling, and your traffic doesn't have to go around the world to get back to you, so your latency is lower, so your queries under AI would be faster, which is one of the things, if you notice, that AI can take a long time before it spits out an answer, and some of that is the back and forth and the searching that it does. So the hoteling component actually enables business access on a local level. The other thing is, what can you do from a workforce training perspective to really tap into the applied aspects of AI if it's an AI data center? And then that would be, be honest, at the rate that we're changing and adopting AI in business in general, there are whole classes of employees that are going to be wiped out. And that includes people who are working as software engineers, because that's one of the things AI is really good at. The other is even document drafting. So the thought is how do you transition your workforce to take advantage of it? And by the way, it's happening quickly, and it's happening now. So it's something that we should have been doing yesterday.
Yes, agreed.
I think that should be something that's paid for by these tech companies, honestly. Like,
that's your public benefit plan. It also transitions your economy. So, and that's the opportunity here.
Lots to think about. So I'm just going to ask, I'm going to bring us back to the SEDS a little. I mean, not that definitely all of this has to do with the SEDS. I mean, I feel like the SEDS is your way to decide where you want to be on so many issues, right? Like where you want to put your efforts and how you want to react to different developments like this. I guess I'm curious where you all, I feel like, and I apologize, I know that some of you said this probably in our first call, but where are you all with your SEDS? Like, are you starting? I feel like some of you are starting a new one soon, and some of you maybe aren't, but Yeah. How many of you are in the midst of starting a new one? Okay, a few of you, about half. Okay. And like, I guess do you have like your committees together? Like, are there things that we can, are there questions you have in terms of, where to start or how to start incorporating some of these ideas? I mean, I think we've showed examples and hopefully that's helpful in seeing how they work in reality. Um, and, I guess I should say, I do think the 8 capitals, like in the work that I've done in communities, I feel like the 8 capitals really resonate with people. And I think that it provides, again, like Chad was saying, like it makes sure you're not missing anything, right? It's almost like I don't want to call it a checklist, but it makes sure that you're accounting for all those tangible and intangible assets that might not always show up in a SEDS, like the kinds of skills and expertise in your area. I mean, some of that will show up in a SEDS, but some of it won't. So I guess I'm just curious, like where you're at with your SEDS and how we can or how I can help you as you're thinking about how to do that, how to integrate it.
We're at the very beginning. Ours is due March of next year, and our community planner was in the midst of doing some comprehensive plans. So she wanted to finish up those before we started to delve into this. So we're right at the beginning where we're starting to get, I'm going to call it a steering committee. She wants to call it a strategy committee, but it's the same thing. So
Yeah,
that's where we're at. And we're actually starting to have conversations with county officials. Our first one is actually going to be at the end of this month with Schoharie County. And we're going to ask some of those questions, like some of the background questions of them and where they think they are. So we're at the
cool.
beginning.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's a good place to be. Okay. Yeah. Anybody else want to share kind of where they're at and what's going on or any ways that we can help?
I think we're even before the beginning in some ways. Our last one, both our executive director and myself were not here when it was written in 2017, and they've just asked for extensions at this point because of when COVID stopped everything kind of. So we are starting to think about how we're doing this. And so I'm getting ideas from this, but I know I probably have a million questions. I don't know what they are.
Okay. Well, when you have those questions, reach out. Yeah.
I will.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do like the idea of the 8 capitals though as being kind of a starting point. Like it gives us that point to start and say, okay, incorporate these to start.
Right. I mean, I know it was an exercise, but you all started to do those inventories. I mean, imagine doing that with a group, it's pretty powerful actually. I've done that a lot where I've done an inventory with folks in person in a meeting in a community, and it's kind of fun, believe it or not. People get really excited about their community. It kind of instills a little bit, it kind of brings out that community pride that you really need to like launch this process, right? We want to stay positive. But recognize that there are opportunities that make sense to pursue based on the SWOT and whatever else is going on. And so yeah, I do find it a lot of times, I guess one thing I'll just say is a lot of times when I'm in communities, I've done it a lot of different ways, but one way I've done it is actually put some big sheets up on the walls for the different capitals and give people like sticky notes and just have them and it gets them milling around, talking to each other. And it's like kind of, you're not just sitting and talking, it's like you're doing something. So I know it sounds super simple, but it is very useful and it gets people.
It's not though, because we just did it. We're in the middle of I think I've shared this, we're in the middle of a spaceport feasibility study for inland launch site.
Yeah.
And so we've been out at the communities and that's that's when you talked about this, that was my idea. I'm like, okay, wait, we can take, instead of SWOT, do the big sheets with the capitals and start there. Right. And that kind of, like you said, it gets people talking.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good idea.
It is. It's a great idea. And you can actually do it for the SWOT too. You can have different color um, stickies for the SWOT. You know what I mean? Like you can cut those pages into 4 quadrant. Like you can still do the SWOT that way, not just the inventory. But yeah, I mean, I found it to be really useful and you know, I guess you know, you can use it as an ice. I know we've been doing kind of silly icebreakers, but you can do it as an icebreaker in those meetings too. Like, what's your favorite thing about this place, right? Or, you know, and just use that as a starting point. I find there's so many ways to do it. I'll have to put together kind of like a resource about facilitating meetings using wealth creation because I've done so many things and I haven't really captured it in a way that I can give it to you. So, but that is something I'm going to start thinking about now that I've just processed that. So thank you.
My other favorite open-ended question is,
Yeah.
looking at your community, money's not an object, what do you not have that you need or want?
Oh,
And then you backtrack it to, okay, if I want this, then what do I need to do to make that happen?
yes. That's great. That's a good one. Cool. Well, I guess the other thing about the asset inventory and the SWOT is, and you know, it's kind of imagining the later part of this cohort, but once you understand what you have and what those opportunities are, it can kind of lead you into the value chain discussion and the market opportunities that are possible. So that's getting a little ahead of ourselves, but you could see it in Chad's stories, right? Like his SWOT and the assets led to the workforce development work that the university is doing and the solar and all of these really cool things that have happened since. So
yeah, and a $4 million water sewage treatment plant expansion.
There you go. Gotta have.
But I mean, those are affirmative things that you can do. If you identify it as a need, then you can start working on the need.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, others and their SEDS journey. Anything you want to share? I don't want to keep you too long, and I know we only have 15 minutes, and we don't have to use it all, but I thought I'd just provide an opportunity. I know SEDS is almost always the piece of this cohort that people are needing the most. So yeah, Taylor.
So we're kind of we're in a very similar space to you, Heather, where we're just putting our strategy committee together, and kind of mapping out the next year. One thing I've been struggling with is committee fatigue. We have a big grant program right now that runs on a committee. We have the Montana Main Street program that runs on a committee.
Yeah.
And that's just 2 of the like kind of multiple programs that pull from our community. And I know we're looking farther and wider for committee members. It's a regional thing. It's less, you know, so there's places we can go. But I'm also trying to balance that with not too many meetings. Like what are strategies to kind of get the most out of your committee? Well, not asking too much time or effort out of them, just because we need them elsewhere too, and we also don't want to burn them out. So that's kind of something that I've been weighing all the back and forths with recently. And I saw, Chad, just in your presentation that was it only 3 strategy committee meetings?
And we didn't invite the same people to every meeting, so you had 3 meetings of 3 different stakeholders. So you're not hitting the same people over and over again. I mean, there's some overlap, but it's not targeted to be the same people for 3 consecutive meetings. Keep it simple. The other way we did it was we did a lot of surveying, and you can do the survey whenever you have time rather than having to make time for a meeting. So the 2 in combination are pretty effective and pretty powerful, and you get in a more deliberate, broken out stakeholder meeting. People are a little bit more blunt about the area that they're in. So you get a little bit more authentic answers than if you just put everybody in a room together and let them free for all. I mean, you know, perfect well maybe do a 4th where you bring everybody back together and go over the results. and then let them comment on the results. But it was pretty effective working it this way. On the surveys, we got over 200 responses. We didn't have 200 people show up personally, so there's some overlap. But we discuss the responses when we do the meetings, and you tease out a little bit more of the open-ended things.
Yeah.
And if you keep the surveys relatively simple, where it's a checkbox rather than open-ended response, you can do the open-ended report in person.
Yeah. And we're trying to balance, like, I guess the committee, we also want to do some like industry focused, maybe wealth, like 8 capital focused roundtables through the region. So that's kind of on the plan too. And then we have like paper surveys and a digital survey that'll go out. So we're balancing all those. And I guess maybe my follow-up question here is, how do I distinguish kind of those roundtables and the survey from the strategy committee? Like the strategy committee feels more like a board almost to me for the process, whereas the roundtables are more just like ways to gather input. And I don't want to get too much overlap, but also want both. And I don't know. I'm trying to kind of figure out the best practices there.
Well, an APC steering committee is really their board. So, we ran it as we give them input, but it was short, and they met every month, just as part of their regular meeting. So we just kind of incorporated the meeting they were already doing.
Interesting.
Yeah, so into the board meeting. So you do a SEDS update, 15 or 20 minutes, just keep it simple, and then move on. And then you have your stakeholder engagement groups. This is really the meat for generating your data.
Okay.
That's
been
interesting.
helpful. Yeah.
Our thought process, yes, we don't want steering committee fatigue, and we're also looking to have a very small committee, like maybe 5 or 6 people, to make it manageable for us as well. But Sarah and I have kind of talked that we're going to limit it to like maybe 1 hour a month, whether it's a meeting or it's, hey, here's what's been written, give us your feedback on it. The second piece that we've started to talk about is holding listening sessions, almost like a roundtable, pulling businesses together and doing that data in depth, like tell us, a led discussion like that, whether it's industry, other economic development agencies, businesses, that kind of thing. But again, we don't have anything set, definitely, because we literally had our first meeting yesterday. Yesterday afternoon at 3:00.
Yeah, decide what you want to do, and then just set your calendar and stick to it, and then make things at like pretty regular intervals at predictable times.
But Melissa, I think it might be valuable if, at the end of each of these sessions, we had just like this gab, like, hey, what's going on? What are you doing? Where are you, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm happy. I mean, this is great. This is, I love that you're all sharing. I mean, it's really, yes, I would like to do that too. So you mean specifically on the SEDS, just have an update on where people are at? Yeah, I like it. Why not? I mean, like I said, it's the piece of this that I feel like people are really needing, and that's kind of always. So we can definitely do that. Yeah, this is great.
I will also say we just created a strategic plan, 1, 3, 5 years out. It's going to our exec committee tomorrow and our full board next week for adoption. And that's also gonna, we're gonna use that in with our SEDS as well. Some of those key pieces, one of the things that we talked about, and Amanda helped me write it, was, housing is very important to economic development. We're not housing developers. We don't really have the knowledge on housing. So if somebody comes to us with a housing project, we shouldn't be taking that on. But if somebody comes and says, hey, I'm looking for a water infrastructure project, then yes, that is something we can help with. So we're also using that to kind of define ourselves and give us our own barriers, so we're not taking on too much.
Yeah.
So stepping out on that just a little bit, think about housing as also an infrastructure challenge. It could be a brownfield challenge. It could be water, it could be sewer, it could be electric. So housing needs all of those things to function. And your role, you may be to do those things that have a housing component to it, or at least empower, but you're not doing housing.
Right, and I'm talking specifically that housing, like we're not
Yeah.
actively bringing in a developer, we're not actively looking for sites like,
Right.
oh, this would be a great place for an apartment complex. You know, those kinds of things. That's
Yeah.
outside of our realm.
But
Mhm.
one thing you could do, and it's what we did at ABC, is we got brownfield money that we could do assessments for people. And we also tied into an RLF and built an RLF that paid for some of the costs of rehabbing a building. So, I mean, those are things that are not just industrial, they can be housing oriented.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody else has them. We have something called land banks that get New York State funding that does a lot of that stuff. Like they
Mhm.
take those dilapidated, blighted buildings, potential residential brownfields. They take ownership of them, clean them up to a certain point, demolish them, whatever, and then sell them to a new homeowner that agrees to put in X amount more into rehabbing and redeveloping it. On the industrial side of brownfields, I just finished obligating my my first EPA RLF this past week, so I'm very excited about that.
That's great.
Those
Huh.
are a lot of fun to work with.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, I should say with I mean, I'm glad you brought up the strategic plan because that's another thing that I didn't really cover here, and I will cover later. But I've seen that with other folks where they're not only using it for their SEDS, but they are using it for their organizational strategic plan. And I think the same applies, right? Like using the capitals, thinking about, I mean, in that case, you're really thinking about, what based on our strengths and our opportunities, what does it make sense for us to be and do, right? And also, I've seen folks use it in terms of organizational culture too, and like kind of walking that walk, right? Like of, being supportive, making sure you're building skills and building those different capitals within your organization as well. So we can definitely talk more about that. I had a yeah, and I don't, that's the thing. I don't really have any examples of, I have to see if I can get, Region 5 in Minnesota. Um, they're also one of my superstars, and they have used it in their own organizational strategic plan. So I will see if I can find a copy of that as an example, because that is something I'm seeing more and more of is economic development districts, are always so focused on the SEDS, and not all of them have strategic plans. But I think it really makes sense for just the reason that you're mentioning, Heather, which is that you can't be everything to everybody, right? And how do you make it clear what you do and what you don't do, right? And where your strengths lie and where they can be brought to bear in different situations. So I think it's really important for all organizations to have strategic plans. It's something I do strategic planning kind of in my consulting life, but I think it's regardless of who's doing it, I think it's a really important step just to make sure you as an organization know where you stand, right? And then I think you can be even more successful at implementing your SEDS, and figuring out, again, what does it make sense for you to do and where do you need to build partnerships to make other things happen, right? Because you can't do everything. Again, the SEDS isn't something that you're going to do everything. It's the things that need to happen in your region and how are you going to make them happen by creating partnerships around those strategies. So thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate it because it's really important and I neglected it because I don't have a good example, but I will find one and I will, yeah, I'm pretty sure Region 5 is my example. Yeah.
When ours gets approved tomorrow, I will
I-
send it to you
oh,
because quite honestly,
fantastic.
it is fantastic.
I'm excited to see it. Thank you. All right, that's even better.
Yeah,
That will
I'll
be
mention
lovely.
one of the challenges is plane alignment. So I'll use an example of the SEDS. We had done a technical assistance through EDA on getting all of the different economic development entities aligned. When we met with Louisiana Economic Development, the state, they didn't know the SEDS existed. And we make efforts to align ours to theirs, but they don't always do the other way.
Wow.
And I would suspect it's more common than not.
Yeah.
So it even complicates things in that Louisiana is kind of weird in that you have all of the federally designated economic development entities, the ones that are designated districts through
Yes.
DRA. Well, we use Delta Regional Authority. Some are doing
Right.
Appalachian Regional Authority or any one of the others, and EDA. The state works through the regional nonprofit economic development organizations for most of the work that they do. We kind of have in our domain the ability to go after infrastructure dollars, and they have the grant programs that the state does, but the two don't talk to each other,
Oh.
and their plans
Yeah.
don't line up.
Yeah,
And I'm
we
sure I see a lot of nods of yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we have something very similar. We've got a regional economic development council set up by the state, and our organization and theirs a lineup. Exactly, we cover the same areas. The difference is, state run. And yes, we don't always align, but I think, and Amanda should agree on this one, I'm hoping, is we've gotten a good relationship with our RADC partners. So I'm not saying it's starting to shift a little bit.
The technical assistance
Yeah.
that we did shifted the conversation. The resistance is more on the regional state designated side than the state itself. And you throw in workforce, which is another component of this, and then you throw in the universities and the community colleges. It's a real nightmare to navigate. And I would hate to see it from a business perspective of how, because the state will promise stuff to a business they're trying to recruit that then has to be executed by people who knew nothing about it.
I put a link in the chat to our community visit report. It's just like a basic thing, but yeah,
Cool.
that's something that I highly recommend. Heather loves them too, but it's very fun because we get all of our partner organizations out there, and like that has really, I feel like, solidified our relationships throughout the community. It's like, the local colleges have like a task force. They come out sometimes. Sometimes Department of State comes out. It just all depends on like the community, but highly recommend and very fun.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing that. Excellent. This has been amazing. I really, gosh, we have like 2 minutes left, and I don't want to keep you longer than I said I would. But any last thoughts before we cut things off? But this has been great, and yeah. Yes, I would love to keep this conversation going. So we will. I mean, yeah, that's the great thing about this cohort is we're going to get to know each other over the next few months, and we're going to learn all about what's going on in each other's places. And I love the peer kind of sharing and problem solving. So let's keep it up.
Chad, sorry, we'll be able to access your presentation. Is that correct?
Yeah, Melissa has
You'll
it.
send that out. Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
I have
Thank you.
it. Oh, and yes, I have it. I'm going to share it. I will put it up along with the recording. Of course, I didn't, where there is homework, which is, and I'm not suggesting you do the whole, so I thought we could, there's the SWOT analysis template and this opportunities to build partnerships. I would say do one of them or do both of them. It's completely up to you. As just try using them. And again, it doesn't have to be comprehensive. It's just, I'm just trying to get you to, utilize some of the tools available and start the thinking process. So I'll send these to you as well. And we will have our next call on the 20th. So thank you so much to Chad. I really appreciate, the usual stuff, the websites, please take a look at them. Reno, I am trying to put together a wealth creation session. I would love if any of you were going to be there for you to share kind of your learnings and how you're thinking about it. But yeah, anyway, thank you so much, Chad, for sharing with us and thanks for your questions and your sharing of what's going on with your SEDS and let's keep it going. So I hope you have a great rest of your day and week, and I will see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, y'all.